Okay, it is 7:05 PM, November the 16th, 2016. We'll call the regular meeting of the Economic Development Commission to order. First order of business is a public hearing. Give interested parties the right to appear and be heard on a proposed Chapter 380 development agreement with Slim's Chicken LLC / Slim's Chicken Restaurants. Are anybody signed up to speak at the public hearing?
No, Mr. President.
Okay, I guess we'll adjourn the public hearing at 7:05. Next item is citizens to be heard. Do we have anybody to sign up for citizens to be heard?
No, Mr. President.
Okay, items 4 through 6 are the consent agenda. It's approval of the minutes, approval of FYI 2017 revenue and expenditure report, and approval of the quarterly investment report dated September 30th. Does anybody have any questions or want to address anything on those three issues? I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Diane Anderson moved.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Joel Lutz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Item 7 is discussion and action on a resolution by the Board of Directors of the EDC approving the 380 agreement between Slim's Chicken LLC, Slim's Chicken Restaurants for the provision of sales tax grants, incorporating recitals, declaring a public purpose, authorizing the executive director to negotiate, execute, and take all necessary steps to implement the provisions of the resolution, providing for severability, repealing any other provisions in conflict herewith, and setting an effective date. Could I have a motion to discuss, please?
So moved.
Diane?
Second.
Seconded by Wayne. Do the staff want to make any comments addressing this?
Yes, sir. You'll notice there was actually a lack of a resolution or a development agreement included in your packets. I did take some time over the last few days going through. As you know, I was not at the last meeting. And so it's my understanding that the Board of Directors approved entering into a 380 agreement with Slim Chickens for 40% sales tax reimbursement over the course of 10 years. The agreement has not been completed yet. It is a standard agreement that we have used multiple times for 380 agreements, but I haven't had the opportunity to go through it yet. As you know, we needed a public hearing tonight in order to approve that project, and then it has to go to City Council for approval as well. What I am recommending tonight, so long as staff abides by the details, the 40%, the 10-year maximum, that you allow me to negotiate and execute that document after I send it to City Council and have them authorize the agreement as well, because the applicant is also requesting 40% of sales tax from the city and 40% of property tax from the city as well. Again, it's my understanding that that's over a term of 10 years. So what I plan to do, I today asked, because I know when this goes to council, there are going to be some additional questions. Today, I asked Glenn to provide me with not only the publisher's affidavit for tonight's public hearing, and he did do that, but also to have SSCP Management, who is the developer / franchisee, provide us with 12 months of executed sales and use tax returns sent to the comptroller for the following Slim Chickens locations: Humboldt, Texas, Spring, Texas, and Tyler, Texas. In discussing that with Glenn, they're actually unable to get those sales tax returns because this would be their first franchise under this development company here in South Texas. I was under the understanding that this development team also handled the other Slim Chickens throughout the state, and I wanted to verify their projections of the $2.2 million. They provided a response that they were not able to do that, and so Glenn provided me with a QSR report, which basically gives the U.S. average sales per units, a unit being one brick and mortar business for all chicken. They seem to be in line with a Zaxby's or a Bojangles. They are certainly less, it's anticipated they would not produce as much volume as Chick-fil-A. I still believe the 2.2 is probably a little high, seeing as how this is their first franchise here in South Texas, but their 2.2 is not out of line. It's sort of middle of the road of all the chicken. The other thing that I asked Glenn to provide me today was executed building permits with construction valuations for Humble, Spring, and Tyler. The purpose for that is when council asked the question, they say they're going to build something that's 2.6, 2.75 million. I want, for the property tax purposes, I want to be able to respond appropriately to them that yes, in other cities, they pulled building permits with construction valuations of that dollar amount. So we are still going to be getting those from those three cities. Again, I wasn't here at the last meeting. My apologies. I'm not opposed to this agreement. I have my reservations, but nonetheless, I would ask that y'all would allow me to negotiate, execute it, and then send it to council for their approval and for their components, and then hopefully we'll get this whole project done.
Any individual questions for Rick? Wayne?
No.
Joel?
I don't really have any questions. I share your reservation just as another chicken restaurant is really all it's my only objection is that really what we need here? But I did vote yes for it in the last meeting, and I would be okay with that, executing it.
Okay.
I'm fine.
The only comment I have to it is this is not just Slim's Chicken. They're building a
True.
strip center down there. We'll have additional businesses on the property, correct, Rick?
The developer is only developing Slim Chickens up front. They own property to the rear of it.
They were gonna, they already had a development plan for part of the rest of the property.
That is another development I believe you're thinking about.
Yeah.
They have a site plan for the back.
Well, they have a site plan, okay, they have a site plan for the rear, yes.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that they have any intention of doing that
That's
at
not-
this
not
time.
on the board yet.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, they may be selling that property to somebody else to develop it for medical or office or something like that. So, but this agreement would only be on the chicken restaurant, not on any development to the rear of
Rest
that.
of the property, okay. I was wrong about that. Could I have a motion to allow Rick to complete negotiations on the 380 agreement to present it to council?
So moved.
Diane Anderson, motion,
I'll second.
second Joel. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed unanimously, so you're authorized to go ahead with it, Rick.
Thank you.
Item 8 is discussion and action on the 2017 strategic plan. Could I have a motion to discuss, please?
I'll motion.
Joel?
Second.
Second, Wayne. Wayne, you weren't here at the last meeting, of course. We had a brief discussion about this, not at the last meeting, I believe, but the meeting before, and made a few comments on it for some changes. I don't, do you want to go through this by line item, Rick, or?
If I may, Chair, the last meeting y'all had, y'all actually said to postpone this until December. I opted to put it on here just in case you wanted to discuss it for the benefit of the new member, since that was a development in the interim of the last meeting and this one. I can quickly go over those changes that were incorporated in the last meeting. Essentially, there were 4 amendments. Number 1 was to delete reference to the Helotes Creek Linear Park project, but to allow for investigation of other funding sources for the implementation of the Helotes Creek Linear Park at a later date. The second one was to remove reference to the Helotes Area Merchant and Business Association since they're no longer in operation. The third was to add the Old Town Helotes Special District Pedestrian Bridge to the list of capital improvement projects. And the fourth was to ensure Retail Strategies, which is our consultant for retail recruitment, to provide a quarterly presentation to the EDC Board of Directors. And so those changes were incorporated into the document. Like I said, I wasn't at the last meeting, but I watched it all. And I specifically put on there discussion about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service critical habitat designation. We've talked for a long time about senior housing coming into Helotes, given that there's a need for 55-plus or 65-plus housing that isn't on large acreage tracts. And also, y'all have been privy in the past of discussions about wanting some form of hotel development in the city to generate not only as conference space and hotel space, but also to generate additional revenue through the hotel occupancy tax that has been implemented in the corporate city limits and also the ETJ. The real reason I wanted to put this on the agenda is when y'all discussed the critical habitat designation at the last meeting, there wasn't much discussion on it at all. And it was simply mentioned. I really would urge the EDC to incorporate doing something about critical habitat on the Bayless Miller property. That's at the intersection of Scenic Loop and Bandera Road. Even if it isn't something that we would do this fiscal year or next, incorporating it into the strategic plan, in my opinion, would lay some framework or groundwork for eventually addressing that issue on the largest remaining tract of land that we have in the city. I believe it's 33 or 34 acres. I did ask Glenn to include on the dais, and I think he just passed it out, the critical habitat designation that is overlaid on that property. You can see it's number 3, and it takes up much more than 50% of that property. So in a sense, what you have is, besides the hard corner at Scenic Loop and Bandera Road that makes that tract of land unusable, in order to preserve a karst invertebrate habitat that isn't even located on that property. The property with the cave is located directly underneath the number 3. So you can see there's a wide swath of critical habitat designation protecting that cave. Now, there are mechanisms to appeal critical habitat designations and remove them from pieces of property. We have looked at this in the past, and you're talking about upwards of $100,000 to do so. The concern in the past was, well, shouldn't that be the property owner's responsibility or the developer's responsibility when they buy the property? In a perfect world, I would agree with that. However, in my opinion, we are dealing with a property owner who has a large volume of land in Bexar County and doesn't necessarily have the impetus or desire to spend that on this particular tract of land. I don't believe that individual particularly is concerned about the concerns that we have from an economic development perspective, in that it is the largest remaining tract of land in Helotes. And bottom line is it basically makes it undevelopable. So the EDC and the City Council in the past have drafted resolutions and approved resolutions where we would like to see a corporate headquarters on that site. It certainly is large enough. It may be too far from 1604 at this point, but that's likely not to be the case in 10 years, 5 to 10 years, as growth continues out Bandera Road. So the bottom line is, I think that y'all should reconsider at the December meeting when y'all, I believe, are going to incorporate all these and take formal action, including addressing that issue in the strategic plan. Of course, that's just merely my opinion, and it's up to y'all.
I think we ought to consider it. Put it in the plan.
I only have one comment on it, Rick. I still feel like it's Bayless Miller's responsibility to do that, not ours. And we can spend $100,000 to have that study done, then he can come in there and sell that to put a bunch of apartments on. Unless we have some agreement with him for some degree of control of what's put on the property, then I'm not in favor of doing it.
Well, I mean, I think all of the above. I mean, that certainly is, I would be fine proceeding with taking care of the critical habitat if there were restrictions from our end on that property. And if at that point the property owner says, no, I don't want to deal with y'all's restrictions or what have you, then that's fine. But at least we have made a final attempt at curing what I believe is really an exaggeration of what the critical habitat should be for karst invertebrates.
That's actually considered a foraging area,
It's a foraging area for,
stretching it, like you say.
yes. I understand the arguments that this is Bayless Miller's property. I understand that. What I'm looking at from the flip side is it's also our problem because we can't get anything on that site. And he's already made it clear that he's not going to spend the money to do that. Now, to your credit, or to your point, we could spend $100,000 on that property and still not get the critical habitat removed. At this point, that is what it is, but we will never know unless we attempt to get it removed. In the past, we talked with Pape Dawson Engineers. They are the ones that provided off the top of their head approximately the $100,000. I believe Councilman Buys was at that meeting and heard that figure as well. Pape Dawson has had a record of dealing with these types of tracts of land and getting critical habitat removed. And you get it removed by being issued a takings permit. So if we were to do this project, the EDC or the city would receive a takings permit, I assume, for that property, and then we would be able to grant that takings permit to whoever we wanted to develop that property. A takings permit basically is that you can take endangered species habitat and develop it. That's what a 10A or a takings permit is.
But that would be issued to the city, not to the property owner?
I believe since we are paying for it, again, that's a part of the negotiation that I think that we would need to have. We would be the applicant on behalf of the property owner. And so if we are the applicant, the person who is applying for it is the one receiving the 10A permit. So, and again, that may answer one of your questions about we would then have control over what would be developed on that property versus what, wouldn't be developed on that property. And remember, I mean, we still have, I understand your concern about multifamily. We have the zoning code doesn't allow multifamily on that site currently. So it wouldn't be allowed necessarily by right through zoning. No, he could apply for a PUD or something like that in the future and get multifamily on it. But I seriously doubt that would happen, given the restrictions in our zoning code and given the council and the planning and zoning commission that we have currently.
Okay, I don't know that we need to include that in the plan at this point, but we could possibly give it about 6 months to see what the political climate is, and then bring it up before the EDC and the council at that time. It might be possible in 6 months that you might have a little more favorable audience in Washington to getting something done than you do right now.
I mean, that certainly is the case.
Want to give it, wait until, let's see, this is November, bring it up in, scheduled to bring it up in May and do some prep work on it and bring it up to the EDC and the council.
Would staff be given the opportunity to investigate further with Pape Dawson, figure out the 10A permit, if it can be issued to us directly, talk to the property owner and say, we are willing to look at this if there are some restrictions on it from the city side on what is developed on that property?
I think we have to, otherwise we're just, you know.
That's a reasonable approach.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's the case, because when we start going to do that, I don't want to receive any negative comments that, hey, what are y'all doing? So we'll proceed like that, and then we could bring it back in May or June.
Bring it back in May or June, and I personally would like to see if we're gonna do it, if it's $100,000 of joint financing between the city and the EDC. We've got.
And the property owner would be
Right,
nice.
right, yeah, we have to get,
Yeah, I would like to know what we're gonna get out of it in
Direction from
the
the
end when he
property
sells it for significantly more money than what he could ever get for it now.
Well, the theory is he would be selling it or developing it himself, and so the city would be generating additional property tax and sales tax off of that property.
Of course.
I mean, otherwise, there'd be no reason to do it.
right.
Okay, well, then we will proceed in that
We got
fashion.
a consensus on that. I think that's a
But
reasonable
there could be a
approach.
chance he could hold it for another 5 years.
Well, I don't think he wants to, but
He
he's
doesn't want
just tired of spending money on it. He started this process and dropped it a few years ago, and he's just decided he's not gonna spend any more money on it right now, so maybe we can kind of work in conjunction with him and get something started on it.
Okay. So we will not include that in our revisions to, at this point, the strategic plan, but we will bring it back for consideration after we gather more info in May or June.
Right, and
Okay.
try to get consensus from the council on what they think about it, too.
Okay?
The only other thing I saw going through here, Rick, is we could take, on goal 2, take item 4 out. We're referencing Freeze and Nichols, we already have, we haven't approved their plan yet, but we already have it in place. We don't need to utilize them any further, we'll just be addressing what's in the plan if we go forward with anything on the ETJ.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Goal number 2,
Item 4.
eliminate item 4. Okay?
And under extraterritorial jurisdiction, the only thing that I would like to see us do would be to do a resolution to the city council recommending, or that I have to give you all some background on it. Glenn or Rick can give you more background than I can. I'm doing a municipal development district in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. That would be run by a board similar to the EDC. It could be the same board as EDC. It could be a separate board. It could be council people comprising the board. And that would allow the city up to collect an additional half-cent sales tax that would be controlled by that board to use for city spending. I would primarily, I guess, for capital expenditures.
Yeah, I mean, if, Glenn brought this up a long time ago, and I've been resistant to it because it has to go through an election, and we never know how elections are going to work out. But in looking at it further, I certainly am no longer opposed or concerned about a municipal development district. Basically, a municipal development district is almost identical to an EDC. It's except the scope of work that it can undertake is broadened. It's not as restrictive as what a Type A or a Type B economic development corporation can do. And so the capital improvement projects that you can undertake are broadened. One of my concerns is how do we handle, if we want to look into doing that, how do we handle the transition from an EDC to an MDD, or do we transition from an EDC to an MDD? I think a city our size, it may be a little bit easier to handle transitioning the EDC into an MDD, so that we don't have another board that we have to deal with but rather keep the board that we have and just change the structure of that board as it is.
I
And
think you still have to have an EDC board too. You have to have an Economic Development Commission as a separate,
You have the choice
Yeah,
to
you-
keep the EDC for the corporate jurisdiction and create an MDD for the ETJ, or convert the EDC into an MDD and apply the sales tax to the entire region.
to both the ETJ and the corporate city limits.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is, to me, is more efficient, because then you still only have one board, and the communication between city council and the MDD is easier at that point. I've been looking into headings of how you structure that election on the ballot, and basically you would structure it and say, to implement an MDD that would, and this is not, I'm just spitballing here, but you would eliminate the MDD, the EDC, only if the MDD was approved for the corporate city limits and the ETJ, and those people in the EDC would then be directors on, you see where I'm going with that? So that we wouldn't be caught with our pants down and somehow lose our EDC and not have an MDD.
just automatically
Yeah.
roll over into
Yeah,
it.
and as long as as long as the wording is specific and tells the elector or the person voting specifically what it is you're doing in plain English, it is a doable way to handle that transition. And again, it allows us then to collect sales tax from our ETJ, which is significantly larger than even our corporate city limits. So, it would basically double the amount of money coming into the EDC for capital improvement projects.
Close to it. or
Well,
might
close to,
actually
it
be.
depends, yeah. Particularly the area around Shanefield and Gulm and all that area.
Right, that area is growing faster economically than the area within the city limits is at this time.
Yeah.
And I guess with the city limits right now are just running, just the right-of-way is all that's in the city limits out there on
Yes.
1560?
Well, 1560 to Shanefield, Gulm, Braun. We did just recently annex Brycewood, which goes from the back
Right.
end of Beverly Hills all the way to Gulm. But most of the annexation out there is just streets.
Well, that might give us a little bit of another selling point maybe to get some of those businesses to come into the city. They feel like they're already gonna be participating with sales tax. They could just pay a property tax and no more sales tax and then have police and fire protection from the city.
Or it would open up the opportunity, say, hey, if you annex, we'll voluntarily give you some sales tax back.
Yeah, use that as a carrot, stick and a carrot.
Yeah.
I think it's something that would be good to approach.
I agree.
Maybe add that in to,
The Mayor June discussion with
yeah,
council.
just go ahead and put it, yeah, we can do it with them then, do some research between now and then, but go ahead and put it in the
Strategic
plan
plan.
under extraterritorial jurisdiction to present a resolution to the city supporting the municipal development district and work with staff in the city to facilitate possible election to.
And we'll
Yeah,
wordsmith it to
Just
where.
wordsmith it, add that to it. And I think you want to leave the statement in there about the funding to search for alternative funding for the linear park project.
No, I don't. At this point, I've given up. So if y'all want to remove that, then y'all can certainly remove it.
The only problem I have with it, I think we kind of dropped the ball when, the way we did it when we hired the firm to do the design on it. If we'd hired our engineering firm that we use, we probably would have had a design that would have come in would have been more workable and come in at a lower cost. I think right now, to ever make that thing work, you're gonna have a complete redesign before you'll get the cost down to even make it feasible. And since we've given up on this one grant, I don't think there's much chance of us getting another grant from anybody to do it.
Again, that is squarely within the board's discretion. I've always been, and y'all know this, I was an advocate of the Helotes Creek Linear Park. I was an advocate because I've worked on that park since 2007, trying to get those grant funds. I have no emotional attachment to that park at this time. I did watch, let's just say I've gotten over it. I did watch the last discussion that the EDC had. There was some interaction between two members or directors at that point. I saw both of their sides, but I will say that this is a strategic work plan for 2017. So one of the directors that spoke about it, I tended to agree with them personally because this is an annual strategic plan. It's not meant to be necessarily 5 or 10 years down into the future. So if y'all removed it from the plan, it's, again, don't worry about hurting my feelings. This is y'all's plan, not mine.
So this is 2017 that we're looking at. This is not a revision of 2016.
This is the 2017 fiscal year plan. It has to be presented to council at some point because we use this plan as the economic development plan that's required to be presented to the city council in the bylaws. That's why we always title it under that section 4.1 of the bylaws.
We took the 2016 plan and just made the revisions that were commented at the last
So
meeting.
that became 2016.
Yes.
What we're seeing
2017.
here is 2016. We're talking about 2017.
All right, we're talking about what we're gonna have in the one for
Correct.
next year.
Correct. Okay.
I personally would rather not devote any more time and effort to it this year. Not to say that we can't come back and address it later, but not address it in the 2017 plan.
I'm in agreement with you.
But
I
put
think
it back on the table, put it on the table for discussion for next year's plan. Who knows what's gonna be going on in a year, what our funding sources are, how much revenue we're gonna have, so let's pull it out this year and address it, and with a note to put it on the agenda to address it for next year's.
Okay, and we are keeping in, though, the pedestrian bridge portion.
Right,
Okay.
right. Just the Helotes Linear.
Yeah, the
Linear Park Transportation, to search for funding sources, remove that for this year, and we can address that for next year's plan and see if we want to put it back in then.
yes, sir.
I think we've spent enough money on it already.
Time and money.
That too.
Wayne,
I'm good.
you comment?
Yeah.
Okay. We got a consensus on that too, so I think, other than that, I don't know of anything else we need to change or address in this. I haven't.
Pat, can we look at, on goal 2, number 1? We talked about this last time a little bit, just making this a little more clear, maybe a little more detail as far as recruit primary employers, a little more detail as far as, and giving direction on what type of employers that we would want to recruit, or in number 3, maybe we can make that a little more detailed as far as what we would want to give incentive plans to be a little bit more descriptive there.
Okay, there, if I may, there is a specific definition of what a primary employer is.
Okay.
Many of the things that are in that definition, y'all and the city are not gonna like. Manufacturing jobs, that type of stuff. So what we're really talking about, at least in the past, what I believe the EDC was talking about was like a corporate headquarters, or like a call center, or like a Microsoft warehousing of storage, that type of stuff that was not intensive, but yet brought people into town so that they would eat lunch, drop their dry cleaning off, generate some economic activity during the day, because as you all know right now, everybody goes to work in most people go to work in San Antonio, generate all their economic activity in San Antonio, and then they come back home and then they go to bed. And then on the weekends, they may go to Marketplace, or they may go out to dinner here in Helotes. So that's what we're trying to do with a primary employer, is get a corporate headquarters or something that brings people here in order to take care of that daytime population.
And I agree with that.
That's kind of what we have always focused on, even though it's not spelled out. We're not looking at heavy manufacturing or that type of thing. We don't really even have, we've only got, one little area that's zoned industrial that you could do that in.
Yeah.
But we could bring in a corporate headquarters, or
That'll
we've
work.
got some other things kind of along that line to a degree, working with the last 380 we've approved that we're working on.
Oh, with BMC, yes.
With BMC, so we are working that direction. It's just, I don't know how you exactly spell that out. If you spell it out too clearly and leave too many things out, you can cause yourself problems in the future if you get too much detail in it.
What we can do is before the next meeting in December, we'll come up with some options and then present those options to y'all, and y'all can vote on which one you would like.
Any other comments? The only other one I had was, I had a little bit of heartburn under Goal 1 with projects that, like it says, assist is needed with municipal, assist the city as needed with listing 4 particular capital projects. And that almost reads to me that if the city needs additional funding, all they have to do is come and tell us they want additional funding to help pay for these projects, and that's not quite how the system's supposed to work.
You mean we can't do that?
You can come and add, but that almost implies that there is a,
That we have to do it?
that we have to do it.
Could you not just add at the EDC's discretion
With board approval?
with board approval?
Well, yeah, something along that nature, because the problem we've got is we have got, if you look at the level of bondage indebtedness that the EDC already has, we're already higher than the level of, that's recommended for any EDC and long-term debt commitment. And if you look at the manner in which the financial institutions look at how much money you would be able to borrow on long-term debt, I think we looked at that and calculated the most we could come up with was about $600,000 is all we could finance long-term, and we would be maxed out by the guidelines with what we already have. So I think we need to kind of focus on short-term projects, annual projects we can do, and get the long-term debt paid down some rather than looking at incurring any more long-term debt. We are participating to a large degree in the sewer and water project right now, $150,000 a year to the city to help pay for that, and I feel like I don't know if we're gonna continue to fund at that level, but I feel like we probably will continue to help fund that, because that is a very large capital project that will do more to enhance growth in the city than anything else we could probably spend the money on. But we don't need to have anything in there where we would be looking at committing to additional long-term debt.
I can speak to this item. The FM 1560 realignment project's fully funded, and we're done with it.
Okay, we can take that out.
The bridge crossing project on 1560 is fully funded.
Okay,
We're
that's
done
already
with it.
funded.
And the French Creek Flood Control Project is fully funded, and they've acquired all the land, and we're done with it. And the Cedar Trail Culvert, there is no reason to include these as a possible contingency plan on the city side anymore.
Okay,
So if you wanted to strike them all, like I said, they're all funded. They're all being handled by the city and TxDOT.
and maybe just change that last statement to say is assist the city,
As needed
With-
board approval?
assist the city with, those are all capital projects, I assume.
Yes.
Assist the city, when possible, with future capital projects, something of that nature, where we, you know, if we've got the money to do it, and if things fall into place with what could happen, we could have more income than we have now and have more ability to do things. So we want to leave that out there, but not tie it down to an unknown, basically, which is kind of, that's just a little obscure.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll, again, we'll wordsmith something and bring it back to you with underlines, so
Okay,
y'all
that
can
sounds-
see
that
what.
Sounds good. The only other thing that we might do is I would like to maybe see us, well, I don't know that we need to put it in the plan, do some more financially to assist the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe, I think we could just, we don't have to put it in the plan. If nothing else, participate more for the educational luncheons they're doing with the financing on that to help pay for that. Or what are the power lunches or whatever they call them, where they have different business people come in and speak and invite all the businesses in the community to it. We're not talking about, you know, spending a lot of money, but just help them out a little bit with that, and help give them a little financial help with it.
I went to one and found it very enlightening.
I haven't been to one yet. I need to go to some of them.
My $100.
We could probably do that under marketing projects.
Under goal 3, priority 2. Or marketing projects.
Under marketing projects, add another one on there to assist the Helotes Chamber of Commerce with how do you want to word it?
With educational programs.
Funding for, what do you call those, Glenn, educational, what, educational lunch meetings, or power lunches, whatever they call them.
There's two of them on here. Let me go over real quick. Number 3 says work with and support as necessary and appropriate the Helotes Area Chamber of Commerce. And then number 4, right under that, and this is on goal 2, priority 2.
Okay,
And number 4 says coordinate low-cost business development seminars and other educational opportunities through partners such as the UTSA Small Business Development Center and Chamber. I don't know if those would,
maybe put it, added under 5, utilize, well, that one didn't really fit there.
Well, maybe on 4, just put coordinate and support
okay?
low-cost business development seminars and other educational opportunities through partnerships with the chamber.
Sounds good.
That's good.
That sound all right to you, Rick?
Yep, I wrote it.
Okay. And I don't have any more comments on it. If anybody else does, or we can just let Rick wordsmith it and work his magic on it, and we'll look at it and approve it in December. Then it can, well, the city council, it'll have to go to council in January then, so they probably won't have a second meeting next month.
No, they won't. Well, I don't believe they will, but regardless, it'll go to them in January. That's fine.
Okay, that'll be good enough. We'll make it effective January, and they can ratify it in January. I guess we kind of did all that by consensus. I don't think we need a motion to those. It actually kind of covered what we had on item 9, discussion of action on possible partnership, sponsorship, and marketing efforts with the EDC, and we can address more of those as they come up. And the last item we have on the agenda is discussion and action on the election of officers of the Board of Directors as required by EDC restated and amended articles of incorporation, Article 10, Board of Directors, including but not limited to President, Vice President, and Secretary. If we have any discussion on it, anybody like to make a motion on nominating anyone for office. The floor is open.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to nominate Pat Wooten as president and Joe Lutz as vice president.
Second.
Well, are you keeping yours, I believe you, ma'am, are currently the secretary. That's keeping you as secretary, correct?
If so, if the board approves.
Didn't know if she
yeah.
could nominate herself. I guess that was,
She can nominate herself.
Okay, and myself and Diane Anderson as secretary.
And it's seconded by
Second.
Wayne. Guess we can have a vote, but at this point, it's a little redundant. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And be thinking for the next meeting of, if you think of anything specifically that, Wayne, you may have some different ideas, or you've been looking over the finances and the ordinance.
I've looked over it. I've got some questions that I'll get with.
Okay, get with either Rick or Glenn or both,
Yeah,
or
it was
me,
like,
or,
what's your long-term debt? What are the commitments?
okay, Glenn's got all that spelled out.
I'll
He
get
can
with
give
him.
you. So anything you would like to bring up at the next meeting for discussion, anybody, get with Glenn and get with Rick, and we'll see, we're open to discussing anything, and we'd like to get some new ideas going. We've got some new people now, and maybe get a breath of fresh air in here. Some of us have been around a long time. See if we can get things moving a little bit. I think we've got an exciting time coming. We've got more sales tax revenue getting ready to be generated, and more people all the time applying for and looking at development and potential 380 agreements. So we've got a lot of activity going on. It's pretty vibrant right now. We need to stay on top of it if we can. If there's no further business, we are adjourned at 7:51.